Well, originally I started painting because of my music. My whole, the you know, my whole kind of foray into the art world was, what does my musical piece look like? I wanted to see what a certain piece of music looked like. And so the first piece I did, was a representation of a musical composition I had done on piano, and I even put in the musical clefs and the notes using clocks without arms and stuff like that, and then painted the whole thing. And it's one of those things where when you're an artist as far as a musician, but you're not a visual artist, and suddenly you make a piece of visual art, you stand in front of it and you're like, is this shit or is it good? And it just and I really liked it. And I looked at it and I'm like, wow, that's really, really unique. Just from as objective as I can be as an art, as an eye. And I'm like, that's really interesting. That's really unique. And the whole idea of musically composed paintings is something that I've been interested in for a long time. As an artist, I've always wanted to go to an exhibition, put on headphones, and listen to pieces of music. Just like films. Films have a lot of compositions. I work on films, obviously. Music, I work on composing for films. But paintings to me are the same thing. They're not moving visuals, but if you really, really look into them, you can see them moving, especially with music. So we started doing that along with an app that allows for optical recognition and, listening to the music, and it became an adventure. Years ago, I remember a journalist asked me, how would you describe System of a Down's music? And without really thinking, just intuitively, I think I said something like, it's like a violent violin in the middle of a windstorm, which makes total sense because the wind would be propelling the bow of the violin, and it would be a very violent kind of musical entropy, if you will. So that got me, a lot of the things I've said in the past that are kind of poetic quotes or things like that have been kind of marked in my mind. So when I had the opportunity to create visual ideas from them, I was able to. Now, the particular violin that I used I got from Armenia years ago, and I was at the airport and they wouldn't let me take it out of the country. It wasn't an expensive violin or anything. It was just probably a student violin or something like that. But at the time, I faked my way that I could play the violin so that I can prove that it was my violin and I could take it out of the country. Because I just wanted a musical element from Armenia, I'm culturally Armenian, to hang on to. And then years later, I painted it white and stabbed it with its own bow so that the blood would spurt out of it. I might have been watching Dexter a lot on telly, but it just, the idea of a violent violin, it's kind of like I like finding opposite meanings in things, so a violin you usually tend to correlate with very beautiful setting, classical music, sweeping kind of vibe, pretty, I wanted it to be ugly and notorious and destitute, and so it was trying to find the reverse definition in an item, in an artistic sense. I think, look, where we come from, our genetics, our blood, always have a bearing on, what we do, how we do things, irrespective of where we live, how we live. I think I'm very grateful and lucky to have been educated by my travels around the world, from touring with my band as a solo artist, etc., to be able to, live in New Zealand, to be able to live in the States, and spend time in Armenia, spend time in Europe. All of it kind of adds color to my palate as a person, as an artist. But my cultural beginnings have a unique kind of representation. I always think that the most beautiful thing about different countries aren't the borders, the flags, the GDP, nor the military might. It is the culture of those people. It's what makes us different. That is what's beautiful. It also makes us alike. The food, the art, the music, all of the cultural aspects that are really interesting. It's what defines. It's the beauty of life. It's the spice of life. It's the color of this planet, as far as humanity. And so, I think my Armenian culture brings some of that, especially into the West, where it's not a familiar culture in the West. So in 2015 was the 100th year commemoration of the genocide of Armenians, Greeks, and Assyrians committed by the Ottoman Empire in 1915 during World War I. April 24 is marked as the day when the genocide began, a day before Anzac forces landed in Gallipoli, and there's definitely a correlation, obviously, as we know. So in 2015, a good friend of mine, Kiwi composer John Psathis, who I've worked with before, who together we did the Elected Dead Symphony years ago with the Auckland Philharmonia Orchestra. He contacted me and he said, let's do a really cool musical piece for the 100th commemoration of the genocide. And I'm like, what a fantastic idea. So we started collaborating and we wrote this piece called 100 Years, a composition called 100 Years. And so I was in New Zealand, so we had the musical piece and we premiered it with a video for the commemoration in 2015. I was in New Zealand and I had other artist friends here, and we were talking about the genocide and we were talking about some of the issues surrounding it. And one of them reminded me of Adolf Hitler's quote, say in 1939, right before the Nazis invaded Poland. He had a briefing of his generals, and he was trying to tell them that it's okay to act with impunity because history forgets. And he used the phrase, today, who remembers the Armenians? In other words, in World War I, the government of Turkey, the Ottoman Empire at the time, committed this atrocity, this genocide. And yet, who remembers them now? It doesn't matter. Let's do this kind of thing. So I thought it was, so I wanted to link the 100 Years musical piece to this quote. And so all I did was basically write the quote and then spray paint around it so that the quote is centered on a large canvas, and then put a drop of blood with the signature of, Adolf Hitler, 1939. So, and it's been a piece that has had a lot of conversations because it is, it's not a comfortable piece. Not many people would hang that piece on their wall because it's an Adolf Hitler quote after all. But what it's trying to say is that if we're not careful, history is going to repeat itself. That and that we're seeing those things now. We're seeing genocide in the world now. What ISIS did in the Deir Zor desert, for example, in Syria, is definitely genocide, and that's exactly where my ancestors are buried. In the same desert, so bones above bones, if you can see that visually. And then that led me to think, hey, this could be an interesting, dark, obviously, series. So I did a piece of another piece called Pol Pot, based on a quote that the Cambodian Khmer Rouge leader, Pol Pot, had said to his people during the atrocities there in the 1970s. So I may do a few more of those pieces. Again, it's about communicating something. Art, there's many types of art, there's many types of music, and some of it is just made to be ambiance, or to make us feel good, or to enhance our mood in one direction or another. But I generally gravitate toward films, music, art that has a very concrete meaning that makes you feel something, even if it's revulsion, even if it's, not necessarily a positive thing. Because I think that it serves more than one purpose then. Just like the music and the art coming together, serving more than one purpose. So music is a doorway to the truth. The quote itself is, something that I've thought about extensively over the years, because it's kind of a trajectory of my musical career and my activism, wrapped into one. We're actually making a film tentatively called Truth to Power, based on, that concept and based on things that I've shot over the years in my life, that we're gonna, take to film festivals in the coming year. But so the whole thing started with, we had this bedpost, a giant bedpost behind one of the beds, and it had these detachable little pillowcases kind of things. They're really pretty with Velcro in them, and it's been in the garage for a while, and I've been looking at it going, I gotta do something with this. And then one day it just hit me. I had a few hours, and I put it on the easel, and I looked at it, and I had gotten all these masks from one of the emporiums, one of the art shops, and I thought, wow, wouldn't it be crazy if faces start coming out of this, almost like a Game of Thrones thing, from the huge column. And it's just one of those things where you're just sitting there going, that would be wicked. So I started painting these masks and putting them on, and then writing quotes and painting that. And then I thought it would be awesome if this whole thing was modular, almost like a synthesizer, where you can plug and play and change the sound. So I started using the pillows that would be Velcroed on top of each kind of quadrant of the bedpost, back bedpost, whatever it's called. And so you can, whatever quote you like, you can leave exposed. Whatever you don't like, you can cover with another quote. So you can actually, it's interactive, and it is kind of funny, and it's not for everyone, I gotta say. But I can definitely see that in a nice, kind of like a wacky restaurant, or kind of like a sawmill type of place up, in Lee, where, again, it's making statements, but it's also very colorful and very quiche in a way. So it's interesting. That's what came out of me for whatever reason. I'm passionate about a lot of things. Whatever kind of wakes up within me that becomes my vision, that I feel like I need to accomplish, whether it's building a fence, or on the farm, or making a painting, or writing a musical composition, or scoring a film, or activism based stuff, like injustice is always what makes my blood boil. When I speaking of the genocide, it's a huge injustice that hasn't been rectified by the modern government of Turkey, and their role, and their admitting of it. So that kind of injustice led me to kind of seeing what other truths are there out there that are minimized or hidden under the carpet because of political expediency or economic reasons, or governments. A lot of governments, institutionalized organizations, by definition, are corrupt. And so, we as human beings, and especially as artists, we need to be sensitive to the plight of everything, from the environment to our fellow man to animals to, it's if we're going to be alive, and if we're going to be connected to everything, then we can't help but to feel for it all, I guess, is what I'm saying. So that's what makes my blood boil. My blood, hypocrisy and justice is something that's always made my blood boil. The art is an extension of the artist, and to me, obviously, I'm known for doing rock songs and performing and all of that with System of a Down on my own, work with orchestras, do film scoring and stuff. And to me, art is this unique expression that I can't get out in any other way. When I first started painting, I felt that same experimental, lost in time feeling that I felt when I first picked up a guitar and started playing piano, 25 years ago or whatever. And to me, getting my messages across in different ways is very important. It's that expression, and it's a unique form of expression. So what I can do through classical music, I can't do through rock. What I can do through rock, I can't do through jazz. How I express myself through my paintings, I can't express in any other way.